Hey, Soft Tummy Crew. I just wanted to come on here before the episode and actually let you know that when I recorded this, I was feeling absolutely awful about myself for some reason. Lately, I've just not felt very confident in the videos and the clips that have been coming out from the podcast. And when I saw this particular episode, I kind of had a little bit of a spiral, and I convinced myself that I wasn't going to release the episode and that I needed to re-record it and redo my makeup and my hair because I looked insane. And then I realized that it's not that serious. No one is looking at me and criticizing me the way that I criticize myself. And why would I hold on to a perfectly good episode and not publish it just because I don't like the way I look? Especially because the spirit of today's topic really relates to what I felt. So without further ado, please enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome back to another episode of My Body, My Jokes. It's Lorraine Gallo coming to you from Dude IDK Studios. And once again, I am asking for your support of the podcast. Any likes, any comments, anything you can throw me, an email, ask me a question. I love talking to you guys. I love knowing what you have to say, and I love hearing your experiences. And on top of supporting the pod, I've mentioned a few times that this podcast has been nominated for the Diva Podcast Award here in Denver, which is really, really cool. It comes out of the drag community. Diva stands for Drag Initiative and Variety Acts. And I was nominated among a few other really great podcasts featuring drag queens and artists from all over the city. And it's honestly an honor to be even included in that list. But if you'd like to vote for me, you can go to the show notes. There's a link down there. It's just coloradodivaawards.com. And you can go ahead and send in your vote and kind of see what happens. Voting ends like March 14th or something like that. But I'm really excited. I think that's going to be really, really fun. And for today's episode, we're going solo. I thought that I would do a little bit of a brief history of the body positive movement. I've mentioned body positivity a lot on this podcast. It is a term that gets thrown around a lot, along with terms like body neutrality, body acceptance. But what does it really mean and where does it come from? Obviously, we know that body positivity is a movement. It promotes self-acceptance, appreciation of all body types, regardless of shape, size, appearance. But who started the movement and where is it today? Everything I'm going to be talking about today comes from the BBC.com. There was an article written by Tigris Osborne, who at the time of the article, it said she was the soon-to-be chair of the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance in America. So she might be the chair now. She might still be in line to the chair. I'm not totally sure, but it's a fairly recent article. So Tigris Osborne writes about the history and where it came from, and she represents NAAFA, N-A-A-F-A, because they were a key to founding the modern day body positivity movement. So in 1969, Bill Fabry, I hope I'm saying that right, a New York engineer, was really fed up with the way that his fat wife was treated, and he founded the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance. At the same time that he was working in New York on this movement, there were a bunch of feminists in California who banded together and began the Fat Underground. Now, what NAAFA called fat acceptance, the Fat Underground called fat liberation. So while fat acceptance was taking over the East Coast, fat liberation was taking over the West Coast. By 1973, they had released their groundbreaking Fat Manifesto. It demanded, quote unquote, equal rights for fat people in all areas of life. It also called out the reducing industries, aka diet culture, and declared them enemies. So when we talk about reducing industries, we talk about big diet companies, right? Weight Watchers, these really big companies that own several different brands of diets, things like that. And at the same time, we're in the 70s, right? So the civil rights movement has motivated a lot of these fat activists to keep going. And what happened the last 2 decades has moved them forward and wanted to look at, okay, we're moving towards civil rights. How can we also include fat people in this conversation? But unfortunately, what happened with this was that several waves of the activism, as more and more people began to join the movement, more and more people of color were left out of the conversation. And what's interesting is that this is actually because several white people already assumed that fat acceptance was a thing amongst people of color, amongst communities of color. So a lot of white activists who were fighting for fat acceptance weren't looking at it from a multicultural perspective. They were just thinking, well, Black people are fine with being fat. Spanish people are fine with being fat. And they didn't understand that all communities suffer from fat bias. So marginalized communities who were already marginalized were again being pushed back by a movement that they started. In the 70s, 80s, 90s, the movement grew with new groups being formed like the London Fat Women's Group. In 1996, The Body Positive, capital T, was founded. It's a website now that offers curricula, videos. There's facilitators that can get certified to run groups. It's basically a huge collection of resources. There was a lot of fat representation and fat activism amongst the queer community, and specifically amongst pride parades. The queer community was one of the first communities to kind of bring fat liberation to the forefront. And because they're obviously a very accepting and proud community, they're like, well, this is included too. These people are included as well. And then we get to the 2000s. And a lot of you listening, I'm assuming, have lived through the 2000s. Boy, I hope so, because it was an interesting time. Heroin chic was in, being as thin as possible was in, showing off your body like it was your accessory was in. So everything kind of shifted, right? A culture that was already obsessed with specifically women's bodies kind of zeroed in on women's bodies. But at the same time, the way we consume information was rapidly changing. We have the emergence of chat rooms. We have the emergence of message boards. We have the emergence of the first days of social media. So we're able to spread messages much faster, and movements are able to grow much faster and much larger than they once were before, because now we have the internet that you can connect to literally millions of people in one instant. So fat activists took to the chat rooms, they took to the social sites, and then eventually as time went on, as we know it now, it moved on to places like Instagram, Tumblr, Facebook, Twitter. In the 2010s, 2020s, the more people who joined in the movement, the more, again, it was like co-opted by white influencers or thin bodies preaching body positivity. And before we get into this piece, I want to make it super clear that I am the type of person that I think body positivity can be for anyone and everyone, but I think we also have to recognize the roots of like where it comes from. I recognize it's easy as anyone who lives in a body to feel pressure from society because there is so much anti-fat bias. There is so much pressure to not only look a certain way, but be quote unquote healthy in a certain way, only if it fits a certain aesthetic. So can everyone benefit from body positivity? 100% absolutely. But do we need to recognize that there are some people in society who are systematically oppressed because of their body and need body positivity maybe a little bit more? Also, yes. So as we get into the 2010s, visibly fat influencers who at the time, influencing wasn't really a thing. It kind of became more of a thing within the last decade. Visibly fat influencers who are preaching body positivity are being met with a ton of backlash, right? They're being met with, you're promoting obesity, you are promoting an unhealthy lifestyle, you're just lazy, you just want to be body positive so you don't have to work hard. Whereas thinner influencers who, maybe when they sit down, they have a few rolls, or they have to use arrows to point out their cellulite or their one little dimple to show their imperfections. When they preach body positivity, it's seen as such a noble, brave thing because they already live in a body that is more accepted by society. So what's happened to the body positivity movement is that now we have moved from fat liberation and fat activism and fat acceptance to, okay, now we're body positive, but we can only be body positive if you look like you're healthy or if you look like you fit into the standards of what society deems as healthy. So the dilution of the term body positivity has clearly happened, right? I've had many guests on this podcast that have been pro body positivity, people who have been anti body positivity, mostly because of the way the term has been kind of like perverted into a new meaning. Many pro weight loss folks have claimed that weight loss journeys should be included in the movement, seeing as losing weight makes people feel better about their bodies. I think that if you want to pursue a weight loss journey, that's your prerogative. As someone who's in recovery from an eating disorder, I will never do that again, and I would never encourage someone to do that. As I've said before, I think if you're going to go down that route, you should ask yourself, can I pursue this weight loss? Can I pursue this change in my body without losing who I am? And what I mean by that is like, can you pursue fitting into a different aesthetic, whatever your body, whatever you want it to look like, without losing your ability to enjoy food, be around food socially, enjoy exercise, not beat yourself up if you're not sticking to a certain plan or a certain movement routine, things like that, right? But a lot of people have said, well, body positivity should include all of these things, including weight loss, because positivity means you feel good, right? So if losing weight makes me feel good, then what's wrong with that? And honestly, I think the answer is there's nothing wrong with that. No one can tell you what to do with your body, right? Going back to like the title of this podcast, My Body, My Jokes, right? Like I named it that because number one, I think it's a cool title. And number two, it's like I've been the subject of comments about my body my whole life. And it wasn't until within the last few years that I finally decided to take my power back and start talking about it myself so that I could construct the narrative. And so I think if you want to change yourself, like do that, but recognize that you might be doing it because of views that have been developed through a society that oppresses you through that way, right? A few weeks ago, I had Kelly McQuillan on the pod, and she was talking about how we don't really understand how diet culture like just kind of pops up in our head. We were talking about the intuitive eating book and how it really deconstructs this idea. And she made a great point about like, yeah, you kind of just grow up and you just like have these ideas about food and weight and health, and they're kind of just implemented in you without you really even knowing where they came from. And so I think recognizing like, am I doing this because of what I've been told by magazines? Am I wanting to change the way I look because of a bunch of people getting this procedure on TikTok or what have you? But anyway, going into the term of body positive and what it really means, there were a lot of people who also claim that body positivity is too unrealistic of a goal. Body neutrality or acceptance has become more popular and focused on. And I kind of agree. I think body positivity can be kind of difficult because when it was started, when the movement was started, it really wasn't about like loving your body. It wasn't really about like being in love with every part of yourself. It was simply just about like being able to be in your body and not suffer from the bullshit that is placed upon people who live in larger bodies. Hence the words fat liberation, fat acceptance, right? Notice it wasn't like fat positivity. It was just, hey, let's let fat people fucking live their lives. Whereas body positive does feel a little bit more like, okay, I have to feel good about my body. Not only can I just be in my body, but I have to feel good about it. And as someone who has spent more time feeling negative about my body than positive, I can understand why that term feels a little disingenuous, right? So body neutrality has become much more popular. Body acceptance has become much more popular because it pushes the idea that you are allowed to live in your body and accept it as it is and not necessarily love it all of the time, right? Because your body is what it is and you can't rely on it to make you feel good. You can't rely, like you have to make yourself feel good. Either way, it's pretty clear that as the social movements have grown and branched out, many of the marginalized communities got left behind. So like I said before, it's really important to remember and honor the movement's founders and its teachers, many of whom are fat and queer and people of color. A lot of the time I've noticed with even my own social media following, it seems really easy and common to follow like a white woman who is body positive and who is like curvy, and maybe she has the cellulite and has the rolls and has the bigger arms or whatever, but for the most part she has like a proportionally accepted body, which there's nothing wrong with that. Like that person can't control her body either. But it feels like that is the more accepted version of body positivity rather than someone who has an apple body, is round, is larger, like lives in the plus size section and enjoys their life. For some reason, there's this like line that kind of gets crossed. And I've even noticed it in my own who I follow. Like I've had to kind of call myself out and be like, okay, like I need to follow people that don't look anything like me. I need to follow people that are way bigger than I am. I need to understand what they're going through, because the whole point of my journey and what I'm doing is trying to deconstruct fat phobia, deconstruct my internalized anti-fat bias, which is why I had an eating disorder, right? The women who wrote the Fat Manifesto ended it by saying, quote, "We commit ourselves to pursue these goals together. If together doesn't include the fat people and Black people who made body positivity possible, as well as other marginalized bodies, it's not body positivity at all." That's pretty powerful, right? I think that's pretty great. So what does body positivity mean for me? I've kind of touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to give a little bit more insight into, I guess, how it's played a role in my recovery and how I discuss it with like my therapist, my nutritionist. For me, it's less of a mindset and more of a tool, right? So instead of trying to be in this mindset of like, okay, I love my body, I'm fine, I'm positive about my body, it's more of like, when can I reach for body positivity when I need it the most? So a really good example is I have a really bad habit of body checking, which a lot of people in recovery do, right? When I look in the mirror, I'm not just like looking at, oh, is my hair out of place or does this top match these jeans? I'm looking at, how does my stomach look today? How do my arms look? How does this lighting affect the cellulite on my thighs? Where's my chin at? Do I need to gua sha my chin, right? And in those moments, I've had to get in the habit, and I'm still working on it, I'll be honest. I've had to get in the habit of reaching for the body positivity and being like, okay, what is something that I can say about myself right now to kind of like circumvent the feeling? So something I've said a lot of the times for myself is like, okay, yes, I have a belly, right? I'm never going to have a flat stomach. That's not who I am. That's not my body. But this belly protects my organs, right? This belly protects my body. This belly allows me to enjoy and digest food. It allows me to have a core that holds me tight when I'm dancing or when I'm balancing or something. And so finding those moments where I can kind of flip the script, and it's difficult. I'm not going to lie, it's difficult. I mean, even this morning, before I came to the podcast, I'm like, okay, I want to look good on camera. You know, every time I edit the podcast, I'm always like, oh, I should have put my hair a different way. I should have done darker makeup. I should have done XYZ. And it's so silly because it's like, why am I doing this to myself? Literally, no one cares. No one's looking at this being like, wow, Morgan really fucked up her eyeliner. So for me, I try to see it more as like a tool to reach for in my toolbox when I need it, rather than a mindset, because I'm just not there yet. The neutrality and the acceptance, I think I've done a better job with, because as I started recovery, I kind of knew going into recovery, I was like, all right, I have to like give up the idea of losing weight. I have to give up the idea of ever being a size 2 or going back to the size I was when I was in college and restricting a lot, right? I have to give that up because I have to recover. I can't live like this anymore. So for the past year and a half, I've known in the back of my head, like, however my body turns out is the way it's turned out. And my weight has been stable for a long time now. I would say probably like maybe a year. And I only know that because my nutritionist weighs me. She doesn't even let me see the number. She just says, okay, yep, looks good, right? And that has helped me know that I'm doing something right. Knowing that my nutritionist is like, you're doing great, you're doing fine, you don't need to worry about it. Being able to wear the same clothes, being able to like feel comfortable it's somewhat in this body now that I'm not engaging in behaviors helps me to feel that like body neutrality and that body acceptance. I would also say this podcast has really helped, even though it's been a wild journey, even though the internet has been truly awful to me and truly great to me and truly frustrating. I would say that doing this podcast and talking to people has been really, really insightful. And I would encourage anyone who struggles with body image or eating to confide in a trusted friend and just be like, hey, this is what's going on for me right now. I don't know if you deal with this, but like, can we talk about it, right? Can you read this book with me? Can we like go online and find someone to follow? Surrounding yourself with that energy is very helpful. I think also being able to interview so many different people from so many different lines of work and perspectives and ages and places in their lives has made me realize that we all have a common thread, which is that we live in a capitalistic society that profits off of our insecurities and our suffering. So whether we're, pursuing the weight loss or we're recovering or we're trying to accept our flaws or our perceived flaws, or we're just trying to figure out how to move our body after being a retired dancer, whatever it is, we're all connected by the same thread of we live in bodies, and for some reason society has told us that they are not enough. Everyone I've had on this podcast has some kind of background that way, which is why they're on the podcast. And it's weird and sad, but also kind of liberating to know that like we've all gone through this. Like we've all literally been in that position. Like I remember talking to Julia Parzik, right? Episode fucking 3 or I don't know. It was one of the very first episodes. And, she went into detail about like, she used to be a super diet focused, juice cleanse, health girly. And that was her thing for a long time. And she was somewhat of an influencer on Instagram talking about all this health stuff. And then finally recovered from her eating disorder and started going the complete opposite way. And even though it was difficult for her to like switch the audiences, she got to a place now where that's who she is. She's thick and thriving, as she posted a video the other day. Like knowing that she got through it makes me feel like I can get through it. Also talking to like Jessica Lahore, right? She came on, she's in full drag. She's talking about her psoriasis. She's talking about how she used to be a certain size when she started drag and now she's different and her exercise is different and people point out how she looks. But she's like, you know what? I'm a great performer. I'm very intelligent. I'm good at what I do. I don't care. I'm not going to like let this stop me. That's been super, super cool. I think at the end of the day, remembering that we're all on a floating rock in a universe that we like don't totally understand. And I don't want to be on my deathbed thinking about all the times that I was unhappy in my body, right? I know it sounds ironic and cheesy, but like we're all going to get to an age where we look back at our younger selves and think, God, why was I so hard on myself? Like, what was I really doing that for? I don't want to be in my deathbed thinking like, oh, thank God I didn't eat all that ice cream, or thank God I said no to all those social plans so I could die skinny. It doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. So anyway, that was my little brief history of body positivity. And again, that came from the bbc.com by Tigris Osborne, soon to be chair of the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance in America. Coming up, I have some really cool guests scheduled. I'm really excited to, oh my God, I don't know if you can hear that, but my Ring doorbell keeps going off. I don't know how to silence it. Someone's at my house. I have some really exciting guests booked. Dude IDK will be moving to a new studio, which is really exciting. So hopefully there won't be a lapse in episodes, but I'm going to try to record as much as I can. And that was a pretty short episode for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was easily digestible, no pun intended. And please remember to support the pod and to vote for me for the Diva Awards. I'm really excited, and I really hope I win, but I also just want to go and like support everyone else because there's a lot of people in the drag community that I love and that are really cool. Another fun fact is I signed up to be a part of a dance show. So that's cool. So if you're in Denver, I'll be a part of a burlesque show on July 12th, I believe. July 12th. Yeah, it'll be at the Oriental Theater. It's with Hard Candy Dance Studios. It's called Colfax Candy. And I'm learning how to dance in stilettos. And I ripped my toenail off last night at Burlesque Jazz in 4-inch Burju heels. So your girl's going through it. But today, let's end with a fun affirmation, all right? Here's your affirmation. I don't need to feel attractive in my own skin all the time to enjoy my life and relationships. That's pretty profound. I don't need to feel attractive in my own skin all the time to enjoy my life and relationships. You don't have to be snatched, beat, boot the house downs, whatever the fuck all the time to enjoy your life. You don't have to have like the perfect outfit, feel perfectly good in your body. Like allow yourself to just be a human. Allow yourself to just look the way you look and go out and don't look in the mirror and just be with your friends, be with your family, listen to music, look at the sun, touch the grass. All right, that's all I have for today. Thanks for listening. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to My Body, My Jokes. Please be advised that the information provided in this podcast is for general discussion purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. Always, always, always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare professional with any concerns you might have regarding the topics discussed in today's episode. Also, if you or someone you know is struggling with an eating disorder, please call the National Eating Disorders Association helpline at 1-800-931-2237. Bye.